Thank you for joining us today. My name is Barbara Iverson. I'm the moderator for today's digital dialogue. And for the benefit of participants who are blind or have a visual impairment, or people listening later through the podcast, all speakers will begin with a short self-description. So again, my name is Barbara Iverson. I am a white woman with medium length blonde hair, and I'm wearing a sleeveless green shirt. All right. Today, we are putting the spotlight on the opportunities for children in the emerging digital spaces that lead to empowerment and turn children and young people into digital citizens. The internet was designed for adults. However, children and young people are using it on a daily basis and in great numbers. Hence, the protection and welfare of children in the digital space is since long a recurring topic in public debate. Governments have enacted regulations on how online services should treat children's data, prohibit nudge techniques, as well as detect and report abuse. Parents, teachers, and schools are being sensitized and trained to assist children to navigate their online lives. There is consensus that best interest should govern the systems that give access to child users. This exceptionalism obliges businesses to operate along rules that protect vulnerable users. But what can be done beyond risk aversion so as to offer opportunities to children in the emerging digital spaces that lead to empowerment and turn children and young people into digital citizens? The recent COVID-19 pandemic underlined the necessity to provide children with access to information and learning. Digital literacy and online safety programming has to be part of every child's curriculum. So today, to help discuss these questions and much more, I'm sure, we are delighted to welcome Maria Berenguer, who is with SOS Children's Villages International. We'll also be joined by Ryan D'Souza with Child Fund Alliance and Dr. Elvis Fokala from the Center for Human Rights in the Faculty of Law at the University of Pretoria. So each panelist will have up to 7 minutes to introduce themselves, share a bit about the work that their organization is doing, and lay some groundwork for the discussion that we'll be having and your questions. So first, I'm going to ask Maria to unmute herself, and there she is. Maria is joining us from Valencia, Spain today, and Maria, the floor is yours. Please tell us about what SOS Children's Villages is doing.
Thank you very much, Barbara. So, as Barbara just said, my name is Maria Berenguer, and I am a white woman with blonde hair and a black shirt. I work at SOS Children's Villages as team leader of the Youth and Digital Empowerment Unit. SOS is a global NGO working in more than 130 countries and territories, and is supporting children and young people with non-adequate parental care. And in fact, is this target group one of the most needed in order to access digital technologies and digital skills? Why I say that is because children and young people with non-adequate parental care lack the support of the families, of the support networks around them in order to help them in becoming self-reliant. Thanks to the digital access and the digital skills, they are able to access the information that they need, as well as to ask questions, consultations, or access the social and education services which are provided nationally or internationally. But at the same time, this target group, the children and young people with non-adequate parental care, are one of the most vulnerable groups and the ones at really high risk of suffering offline and online violence. So what is really important is that whatever digital program we design for children and young people, we always include a component regarding digital skills and protection training, child safeguarding awareness and skills, but not only for children and young people, but also for the adults and staff and co-workers that are daily supporting and working with them. In these minutes that I have now, I wanted to share with all of you some example of projects that we are implementing at SOS, Children Villages. And of course, later on, I'm more than happy to be contacted and share with you any other link which can explain our projects a bit more in detail. The first project that I wanted to share with you is one called Rafiki. Rafiki, as some of you may know, means in Kiswahili, my companion, my friend. Rafiki is a project led by our Eastern and Southern Africa office, and it's an artificial intelligence chatbot through which someone, a person, can ask questions and receive answers, short answers, which are like accompanied like by voice and videos, and which gives the information related to the question. Right now, Rafiki is being implemented in 7 countries in Eastern and Southern Africa region. And through Rafiki, the child and youth care practitioners, which are the adults that are directly supporting the children and young people, can ask questions related to parenting skills, adolescent problem, online violence and safeguarding, protection of children, etc. And they receive like a small pieces of answers, of information that are quite simple, like to digest, learn, and interiorize. It is a new way of doing like a modern learning approach, which is much more flexible than the rigid trainings that everyone or everybody was doing before. Rafiki in 2023 is also an artificial intelligence tool that is going to be accessible by young people. Young people will be able to ask questions around their daily problems, challenges that they have, administration, procedures that they would like to take or start and they don't know where to start. And Rafiki will provide them answers. Another example of a project that we are implementing at SOS is what we call our Youth Links digital platform. So Youth Links is a social media platform, but it's a private one. That means that in order to enter or to register, you need to have an invitation, and this is quite controlled. With this mechanism, we allow young people to enter into a social media and to recreate those social networks that I mentioned before, that they were, in most of the cases, having some challenges to develop. But we are also at the same time trying to secure as much as possible the online violence or the harm or the dangers that internet may have. Through Youth Links digital platform, young people are able to access to training, mentorship, and digital skills opportunities. Thanks to the partnership that we have with different corporates, one of them, for example, Deutsche Post DHL, employees working on those companies around the globe donate their time, volunteer their time to support the young people in developing soft and also technical skills in order to empower them to join the job market, launch a business, and at the end of the story, become self-reliant. One of the features that we have in Youth Links community platform, which may be quite interesting also to the people listening to us today, is what we call the opportunity board. Through the opportunity board, people can post opportunities for young people, and young people can access to them directly. They also can access to participation skills opportunity. So that means that we have courses there which train staff, adults, and young people on how to engage in meaningful participation processes with young people. The last example that I wanted to share with you, it's also our advocacy work. This year, we are engaging with the UN, for example, on the UN resolution on the rights of the child, which is going to be focused on the digital environment. And we are also contributing to the development of the Global Digital Compact at the UN, led by the Secretary General. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm really looking forward engaging in this dialogue with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. You can turn off your camera, and I will ask for Ryan D'Souza, who is with, wait a minute, I'm losing my place in my notes. Ryan is with Child Fund Alliance, and he is located in New York. Ryan, please introduce yourself, tell us a bit about the work you're doing, and don't forget to give us a brief self-description.
Thank you so much, Barbara, and good morning, good evening to everyone here. Like Barbara said, my name is Ryan D'Souza. I work at Child Fund Alliance based in New York, and I am a Black man with slight facial hair in my mid-30s. I'm wearing a dark blazer and dark shirt. Now, please allow me to share my screen. Oh, thank you, Ryan. So by way of background, Child Fund Alliance is a network of 11 child-focused development and humanitarian organizations working in 70 countries around the world. We provide nutrition, healthcare, education, life skills, and more to nearly 32 million children and families. We were established in 2002, and we have been building on 80 years of collective experiences to improve the lives of children, families, and communities. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So our campaign within Child Fund Alliance is called Web Safe and Wise, Creating a Better Digital World with Children. Coming out of this campaign, we do want to achieve two key outcomes. The first outcome really speaks to strengthening laws and policies so that we may protect children from online child sexual exploitation and abuse. And the second outcome that we'd like to see is to ensure that children are effective digital citizens who are equipped to participate in online civic engagement safely, ethically, and responsibly as part of their healthy development. Much of which is the focus of our conversation today. Next slide, please. So I think that it's important to understand why a campaign like this is important, why Maria and Elvis are here as well with everyone else, and it's because it's the scale of the problem is staggering. At any one time, it is estimated that there are 750,000 individuals globally looking to connect with children online for sexual purposes. And they're using internet platforms like social media, online gaming, and email to disseminate and collect what we call child sexual abuse material. In 2022, last year, the year where data is most recent and up to date, this Missing and Exploited Children Center received more than 32 million reports of suspected child sexual exploitation, which went up almost double from 21 million in 2020. And across all of these reports, we see that 9 in 10 victims were between the ages of 3 and 12, and the most primary victims of child sexual abuse material were girls. Next slide, please. So coming out of our campaign, which launched around 1 year now, we launched it in Barcelona last year, we've developed a call to action that we are asking government, civil society, and the private community, private sector, primarily the tech industry. I won't go into detail with all of them, but for one, we do want to strengthen and enforce comprehensive laws that criminalize online child sexual exploitation and abuse. We are appealing primarily to the tech industry to develop industry standards or codes that would prevent or protect persons from harmful content across platforms and providers. With respect to civil society, we are looking for support so that we can research the prevalent issues related to the sexual exploitation of children online. And lastly, we really want to help prevent community mechanisms so that children feel safe disclosing when they have become victims of abuse. And hopefully we can adopt governments, countries across the world can adopt quality online safety curricula as part of their national school curriculum for whatever country they're in. Next slide, please. What are some of our priorities within Child Fund Alliance? We'd want to deepen our engagement across all of the what we call duty bearers in the online safety space, for example, government, civil society, online service providers, etc. We also want to share the message that prevention plays a key role in intervention with respect to online safety. And we're hoping to do this through both outcomes, which I've mentioned earlier, child protection, as well as child participation. Next slide, please. So I know that you're seeing a lot on the screen before you. What it is and it's a program within Child Fund Alliance called Swipe Safe. And what Swipe Safe is an ecological approach to child online safety that ensures that not only children in the first column, but their families and their caregivers, the community and government are all equipped to support children and young people to make most of the online world. More importantly, we are ensuring that young people and children are supported as champions so that they can deliver training to their peers and their communities, and they can become advocates for a safer online protective environment as part of the overall Swipe Safe model. And I will be sure to share this presentation with you all so that you can read up or more about it. Next slide, please. What does Swipe Safe look like? Well, what it is we've developed a bunch of training packages for children, for young people, for professionals, for parents and caregivers, for facilitators. And it's contextualized. It's a bunch of contextualized training packages that are all translated as well. And they're really manuals and resources of content, knowledge, and facilitation skills that are all required to ensure that we increase, the digital literacy of children so that they become more effective digital citizens in the online space. Next slide, please. So these are just an example of some of the handouts, and we use Swipe Safe. Throughout Swipe Safe, we really plan our program through what you see as 6 sacred stones, where we're hoping that by helping children develop connections, understand the permanency of the online environment, making them aware that the public has a role to play, as well as the other 6 sacred stones before you, to just ensure that Swipe Safe is something that can be shared across all duty bearers and facilitators in the online space. Next slide, please. With a campaign like this, we can't do it alone. So we are partnering with other duty bearers in this space, particularly like the International Civil Society Center, the End Violence Partnership Against Children, the Joining Forces Agency, of which SOS Children's Villages and Child Fund Alliance are both members, and the list goes on. Next slide, please. So just allow me to end by calling you all and saying, how can you get involved in this campaign? Work with the Alliance so that we can increase awareness of the scale of the issue, serve as ambassadors related to our efforts so that all together we can work and have government enact or strengthen laws that criminalize child sexual abuse material. Join us as we have conversations with leading technology companies and have them adopt codes and standards to protect children, and overall work with the Alliance to serve as spokespersons at global forums with international media and other audiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Appreciate that. You can turn off your camera and mute yourself again, and I will ask Elvis to please turn on your camera, unmute yourself. Elvis is joining us from Pretoria, South Africa today. Elvis, please share with us the work that you have been doing and start with a brief self-description.
The first thing that I would like to share first is my name. My name is Elvis Fokala. I'm a Black man wearing a blue African shirt, black with short hair. I am in Pretoria, South Africa, and I'm very delighted to join this group of esteemed colleagues from different parts of the world. And one other thing that I would like to do as well is that I would like to see that we work together with SOS and with Child Fund on how we are going to continue this journey on this important issue. And how would that make sense to what we do as the Center for Human Rights? The Center for Human Rights is an academic and sort of an NGO within the University of Pretoria, right here in South Africa. The University Center for Human Rights has two main responsibilities, two main duties, facets of its work that it performs. The first, within the academic field, the Center for Human Rights runs about 5 different master's programs on varied issues. The first one is the master's program on human rights and democratization in Africa. And then the second one, we have the human rights and international trade and investment law in Africa. And then the third, we have a master's program in sexual and reproductive health rights in Africa. And then we have a master's program as well in multidisciplinary human rights. And lastly, we have a master's program in disability rights in Africa. We are looking forward to expanding on these issues as well, because we have so many other issues that affect our continent, and that we think that we could equip more like-minded thinkers or scholars, tomorrow's scholars, with more of our master's program. The other thing that we do as well within our academic fold is that we publish, and in our publication trail, we also have a doctoral program. We sit with a lot of doctoral students in varied issues that concerns this continent, Africa. In the advocacy part of our work that we do, the Center for Human Rights in itself has about 10 different units on the work that it does. It has a unit on business and human rights. It has a unit on democracy and civic engagement. It has another unit on disability rights, a unit on expression, information, and digital rights, another unit on freedom and violence, another unit on international development law, and another unit again on litigation and implementation, another unit on migration, another on SOGIES, where we speak about LGBTQI rights, and then we have a unit on women's rights, and lastly, the unit on children's rights. I am the manager of the Children's Rights Unit, and within the Children's Rights Unit, what we do within this unit is that we also have an academic leg as a unit and an advocacy leg. In the advocacy part of our work, what we do is that we sensitize the continent. We do a lot of research and campaigns across the continent, right from South Africa into Egypt, on issues that concerns children. Recently, we just returned from Maseru in Lesotho, where we had engagement with the African Children's Committee on the rights of intersex children. And based on that, we have also developed a lot of research that look at studies across the continent. The first that we have published is this book right here that has 10-country study that looks at different countries across the continent on the extent to which they have domesticated the African Children's Charter in their different laws. These countries in this particular study includes Algeria, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Cameroon, Ethiopia, Ghana, Mozambique, Namibia, Sudan, and Tanzania. And we have another volume coming up where we look at different set of 10 countries again, and that will include South Africa, where I'm based. What we've also done, and recently, very recently, is that we've also conducted a study, a continental study on children's participation, on children's rights or children's participation in development agendas. Now, the development agendas that we have looked at in this study, they include SDGs, so that we all know, and then include the Agenda 2063, that's Africa's Agenda 2063, and Africa's Agenda on Children's Rights 2040. What we have done with this work is remarkable because we have also gone to different countries. Last week, we were in Nairobi, Kenya, where we brought children together with different state agencies to discuss ways and explain different methods in which the government invites children or allows children to participate in different strategies at national level. Lastly, and this is a very, very important report that we've done, and that speaks to the reason why we are here today, is to look at children's privacy in the digital era, how to protect children's privacy online. And I will be speaking a little bit more about this study when the time comes to discuss the different the topics that relates to our meeting today. I would like to invite you all to visit our website, because all these studies that I've mentioned to you, you can also have them in e-copies. They're free, you can download them and read them at your best convenient time. The other work that we do as well as a Children's Rights Unit is that we have so many partners. We have partners with whom we collaborate across the continent. And just like Ryan also said, we cannot do this alone. It needs a strong partnership that when we work with these partners, we are able to attain our objectives. We have the Committee on the Rights of the Child, as I mentioned before. We work very closely with them. We work as well with UNICEF in some instances, Save the Children, SOS as well at the African Union level, and so many other organizations that we are able to collaborate with to ensure that we protect children's rights in this continent. I'm happy to be here because the digital era is here, and I'm happy to contribute to these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elvis. And really exciting to hear that all of those publications and studies are available in e-form, and we will make sure to put that into the chat. That will also be available as an extra link that you'll be able to find if you're listening to this later, either on YouTube or the podcast. It will be on the website, so we'll make sure that that's very clear. So now we're going to shift into the next section of the debate or the dialogue, and that means that I will ask all three of our panelists to turn their cameras back on and join Julia and I here together on screen. Elvis, yes, wonderful. All right. So this is the time. It can be quite brief because we've got a lot of questions from the audience to get to, which also reminds me, if you've been listening and you have questions in mind, please feel free to put them into the chat. At any time, anything you hear, you have a question, please put it into the chat. If it's similar to someone else's, no worries. We'll be answering and looking at those later. So now I want to open this to the panelists and give all of you the opportunity. You've been listening to one another, and the beautiful thing is there's already a lot of cooperation happening between your organizations. But as you've been listening to each other, I'm curious if there are questions that have come to mind that you would like to ask of each other. So I see a bit of a nod from Maria, and so I'm going to come over to you, and either for Ryan or Elvis, please share your question.
Great, thank you. In fact, I have one question for Ryan and one for Elvis. So I can maybe ask it and then they can answer in sequence. A question for Ryan. Ryan, you mentioned that one of the priorities that you have in CHIFAN is to deepen the engagements that you're having, like with the government and the civil society around this child protection in the digital environment, etc. Which could be, according to your experiences, like the key challenges that you are having on this, especially like on the government engagement, but also because I don't want to end up with a negative note. So also, like, which are the solutions or the mechanisms that you are implementing in order to overcome these challenges? For Elvis, it's a different question for later on.
Wait, you know what? Let's have Ryan answer it, because I might, if it were me, I would forget the question while listening to the one for Elvis. So let's give Ryan the space, and I'll come back to you, Maria.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Barbara. I actually wrote it down. So yeah, that's an excellent question, Maria. And it's an interesting position where we sit in New York, because what we've started doing, because the alliance is in 70 countries, but when we approach those 70 governments, it's not always the same response. So what we've done is we've used our seat at the UN to really have conversations with the missions. So the missions of those countries, let's say, for example, not name calling anyone, but let's say some of our governments in South America are a bit more conservative on these issues than in other more quote unquote developed countries. When we've had conversations with the missions, we talk about the campaign, the work that we're doing, the overall goal and outcome. We frame it in a way that sort of quote unquote, well, don't you want to help kids? And we usually get a not always favorable, but a more often than not favorable response. It also helps when we're able to come together like under the umbrella of joining forces, or the We Protect Global Alliance, to say, these are the issues. And where I can see, for example, Elvis coming in is I really want those publications as well, Elvis. I want to take a look at them. So I can say, this is evidence-based research and data showing what the issue is. And these are the solutions. These are the solutions that we propose. We can work with you, whether that's curriculum development or some other issue. And we sort of use that as a segue to deepen the relationship and engagement that way. I'm going to stop now so that we can ask Elvis, but I'm happy to expand in further detail.
Absolutely, thank you. So then for Elvis, my question was that Elvis, I was really attracted by the work that you mentioned around children participation and engagement with the African Children Committee. We are like a huge passionate also about youth participation and children participation in whatever project or program we design, because our Lima is really like everything like that is for them is with them. And I wanted to ask you, can you give like a bit more details about like this youth or children participation, or in fact, like what are like the two very concrete like key ingredients that you will say that are key when you want like to involve children or young people in these processes?
Thank you so much, Maria, for that brilliant question. I'm going to answer your question in two ways. The first thing is that when it comes to children's participation, we have to take into our minds that there are two major mediums of participation. The first, and in no other, but the first in the way I'm going to speak, the first is children's participation in the public space. Now, in the public space, we know of children in parliament sessions, we know of children's involvement in school governance, we know of children's involvement in different aspects, including sharing their opinion within the public space, or when they're interrogated by the police and all whatnot in crime situations. The second part is children's participation in the family space or the private setting. Now, that is a little bit complicated because it has to do with parents who have a lot of, well, in many ways, possessive. Now, parents who are able to listen to their children within the comfort of their zones. And you also have parents whom during the day they are parents, or during the day they are medical doctors, not rather maybe pilots or teachers, and at night they are medical doctors. So you have a parent in that particular setting who has a dominance in terms of knowledge, a dominance in terms of providing care, and a dominance in terms of knowing what is good for their child. But there are also avenues where a child could participate in that space. The study that we did was more of children in the public space. We looked at it from two different angles, or three different angles, more on children's participation in government strategies on implementation of the three development agendas that I mentioned, the SDGs, which are expiring soon in about 7 years or 6 years from now, Agenda 2063, which is Africa's agenda on development cooperation by 2063, and then Agenda 2040, which is Africa's children's agenda on where Africa wants to see children's rights development by 2040. Now, in all of these three, I could say it now briefly, that what we found is that the knowledge of children within this continent on the SDGs is quite improved. And the SDGs, to put it in full, It's sustainable development goals for our listeners. It's quite heavy because the children seem to have been taught a lot about these issues around the SDGs, and UNICEF has done some good work across the continent. But when it comes to Africa's agenda on children, the knowledge was a bit low on that point. So what we are doing now across the continent is to remind the states that we do have an African Agenda 2040, we have an African Agenda 2063 as well, that are all very important for children. And because you are from SOS, I could say that we have worked with SOS, you know, and when SOS validated this study on alternative care in Africa, I was present in that meeting and one of those who read the report in order to validate that report. And the next step that SOS is taking now to see how we can have a more continental knowledge or guidelines or general comment on this issue. It's also very important that some of us have been part of that process to encourage in that sense. That will definitely put us in a position where the mantra that we all run around with, leaving no child behind, you know, could be fulfilled to an extent where children without parental care will also be given an opportunity to be involved in decisions that concern them.
Thank you, Elvis, so much. Great. So I want to give space if either Ryan or Elvis has a question for the other two. If not, we will move on, but I want to give you space. So do either of you have a question that you'd like to pose to the other panelists?
I don't have a question, it's more of a comment to say that listening to both Maria and Elvis, I see so much similarities between the work that I undertake. So for example, when Maria spoke about having a recommendation or position on the right of the child resolution, I thought I just did this. Or having comments on the Global Digital Compact. Yeah, that also just happened. So I think that it's going to be, I think I would say to you, Marie, in particular, I would love to have a follow-up conversation about the ways that we can integrate and work together. And in terms of Elvis, we have a lot of Alliance members on the continent of Africa. And the work that he's talking about, I know that our members are involved in the same space. So I am grateful to be in this moment with these my esteemed colleagues to just be able to just, you know, be aligned with the same goal, which is our child participation, digital literacy strengthening.
Yes, for sure. And this is a really lovely group of panelists, particularly because you are aligned. I mean, this is an important topic, but Elvis, you really bring a great backbone into this, the foundation of the research that you've been doing. So that adds a sort of different element that I think I see Ryan and Maria and also our listeners really appreciating and curious about the work that you've done. Elvis, do you have a question or comment for the other two?
For me, just re-echo what Ryan said, and just to add that cooperation is very important in the work that we do. And if there's need for ground research or there's need for cooperation, and that we should come together to see how we foster this. One of the areas that we are looking at, and this is also like a comment to both my esteemed panelists, one of the areas that we are looking at increasingly, you know, is to ascertain the sufficiency of the African Children's Charter and the UNCRC, right, to protect different vulnerable groups of children. And in this space, I'm looking at intersex children, to protect these different vulnerable groups of children who are not sufficiently protected in this continent. And I dare not say that we are all aware of the law that was signed in Uganda recently and how it affects people in that space. But if we are able to protect children from different vulnerabilities, then I think that the mantra that will leave no child behind will have more meaning than what it actually has now.
Thank you so much for that, Elvis. All right, so we're going to shift into the final section of the dialogue today, and that is to address questions that were provided by audience members when they registered. We have quite a number of questions and we don't have a ton of time. So what I'm going to do is ask that I'm going to ask the question to one specific of you. All three of you are very welcome to add onto what the others have said. Please don't just repeat, and all of you try to keep your answers to some bullet points so that we don't run out of time and we can get to as many as possible. All right, so the first is for Maria, and it's from Yvonne, the Co-Creation Hub in Nigeria. And she says, how can we effectively protect children from digital harms and harassments?
Thank you. So I think that there are several mechanisms, but one of them is, for example, what we are doing at SOS, but I just heard also from Ryan that they are also doing it in Child Fund, etc., which is the skills development, the skills literacy, of course, digital literacy, but especially skills and awareness around child safeguarding on prevention and protection mechanism, but always in a very participatory way with young people, because it's not the same thing that an adult says to young people, be careful, the danger is there, that a young person says to their own peers, be careful, this is what is happening. And if it happens, this is what you can do in order to respond to that. The second component is, as my colleagues have, like both of them mentioned, is also the government role. I think that here, like the governments and the big multinational companies have a key role in order to establish the legislation which is needed, the awareness, the knowledge, and the accountability mechanism, which are needed in order to reduce these risks and protect the most vulnerable against these risks.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm going to shift then to a question for Ryan from Subash with SOS Children's Villages in Nepal. And that is, what could be the strategy for the places or regions where there's limited access to digital technology, meaning internet equipment, teachers, to streamline the children in new digital technologies? So it seems to be a question about educating them in how to access and how to use that internet abilities. So Ryan, what do you think about that?
Thank you so much for that. Excellent question. So some of the work I think I touched on earlier when I spoke about the Swipe Safe program, but what I will say is sort of an all-encompassing way is to say, when we have touched on how do we extend our reach, how to expand our reach, particularly in those rural communities, we've really started focusing on repurposing and redeveloping old technologies as new. So, for example, one of our offices in Benin has an online safety radio program. And throughout this radio program, there are regular sessions that are all about teaching children how to be safe online. What does it mean when a stranger approaches you? How do you respond? How do you prevent being exploited, whether that's through sexual exploitation, whether that's some other sort of financial extortion, whether, how do you react to being bullied online, all of these different avenues, because the digital space is huge, first and foremost. So there are a lot of ways that children are vulnerable in these situations. And I think, so it's really, it's programs like that with that radio program. What we've also been learning is that even though these communities are so rural and they may not necessarily have, technology that we take for granted, like laptops, etc., everyone has a cell phone and they are finding ways to go online. Everyone has a tablet. So in some communities, 20 children are sharing one tablet, and it's, and they have a tiered system that works out even better than what we can do here. So I think that, with the Swipe Safe program, for example, that program has an offline element so that you can connect to it no matter where you are. It's sort of what Maria was touching on with that AI component. It's called SAM. I do not remember what SAM stands for, but SAM walks you through the process of how to protect yourself and be safe online through all of these different modules and avenues, and we are looking at the way we can reach the children in those communities, whether that's the radio, whether that's the TV. We also do TV ads, etc. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so it sounds like you're using a variety of different media to get kids more awareness of what's possible. Okay. And it sounds like Safe Swipe is, or is it Swipe Safe? Did I get it wrong?
It's okay. It's Swipe Safe.
It's Swipe Safe.
You got it. You got it. You're there. You got it.
It sounds like Swipe Safe is actually really worthwhile for any of our listeners and those participating today to look into, because I think many of these questions about dealing with people misusing that children might be vulnerable in their use of the internet can address a lot of those questions. So it's worth looking into. I want to step away from the questions from the audience. We'll come back to those in a second that were given before, but there's a question that's come in from Sharifa that I'm curious if anyone can address this one. And the question is, children or people's images are being used on various platforms without their knowledge or consent. And I think Child Fund, I think Ryan addressed this in a way earlier, but has any of the panelists worked on such cases or takedown campaigns? And could you elaborate on how you're handling or mitigating this mischief? So I would think child pornography is part of this, but not the only case of it, that it goes beyond this and to seemingly not so what people might label not so serious, but on the other hand, still is a misuse of someone's image. So I'm just going to open it up to the three of you. Maria, you're unmuted, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I could talk a bit about the mitigation measures that we are implementing. So the first thing that it's very important is for children and young people to understand the dangers of sharing. For example, like a picture. Of course, like pictures can be stolen. That's another story. And this is like the legislation part that I can add later on if my colleagues like finish. But the part of the awareness on what are the dangers out there, how dangerous it is, for example, to share your image, to say where do you live, to which school do you go. There is a lot of like things that all of us may say, or no, maybe like most of us would say, no, but it's not a dangerous thing. Yeah, but it is. So especially like in the online world. So I think that what we do a lot like in SOS is really like to build awareness about like what is right, but I really say like there is right or not like advisable to do and advisable like to do, but we always like share it, as I said before, like as a child-friendly materials, stories. For example, one project that we have that work really well is a comic that has been created by young people with the characters designed by young people, where they enter in a fictional world like a Spider-Man Marvel world, and each character has like a digital, let's say, threat, which is like the bad person of the comic, and then there are like the heroes. So it's this kind of also like through gaming. So this is like what our experience talking to young people is really like, these are the kind of materials that really interiorize or enter in them and make them to understand and be aware. And I think that that's like the first step, because if you only like develop a guide and give it to them, then I'm not really sure like if they read it. But with the comic and the gamified option, it's something that for us is really working for them to really understand the dangers that could be there. We are happy like to share these examples later on with whoever is interested.
Yeah, please do. I mean, I think that's really huge. Children hearing from other children or teenagers is a different story than hearing from adults, and especially in media that they relate to and understand. Gaming is a huge way to communicate these things. Elvis, I'm curious if you have done research, and then I'll come over to you, Ryan, on this. Elvis, do you have research in this area as well?
Yeah, so I will just respond to this by stretching the question a little bit further.
Great.
To include fingerprints. Now, besides image, we also have the danger of children losing their fingerprints or their fingerprints being tampered with. as they swipe over the phones or they play around with the phones, you have fingerprints materials that have been collected digitally through these platforms. Now, are those safe? Yes, in most instances, because we have those safety safeguard measures that most phones have in place these days, where nothing goes beyond, they stay for 5 seconds and they become invalid. But where it comes to the image of a child, what we have done and what we continue to do, either through education or through awareness campaigns and research, is that we encourage adults in the space where children are involved, that before the children are involved in any space that has to do with static or motion images, consent becomes very important, where the children are told where their images will be put, one, and then the children consent that, okay, this is fine for our images to go on this website and for this reason. Of course, that to a very great extent might exonerate the person who is taking the image at a material time, but will not sort of provide safeguard to the third party who just takes the image from another website and does things with them or puts them in different strange places. We know for a fact that avatars have been created or images, static images have been made to have motions now with so many things happening within the AI world. So what we have tried to encourage in that space is that children should learn how to read the terms and regulations of different service providers, something that adults do not do as well. But for children to do that, there is need for all terms of reference on every platform that children are involved or exposed to children, that those are brought down or translated in a child-friendly manner. Kept simple, 5 bullet points with images so that children are able to understand that, okay, if I do A, this is the danger that I will face. And maybe to add a little bit to what Ryan said earlier.
We're actually gonna have to close it there because honestly, our time has run out. So I'm so sorry to say that, Elvis, but I have to wrap this up. And there are so many more questions from the audience. Of course, this is a topic so many people care about, but what I will say is I encourage all of you who are listening, watching, participating to look into the different programs that our panelists have talked about. Look at the research Elvis has, look into what SOS and what Child Fund are doing, because there are a significant number of programs that are addressing these questions and these needs. And I think you'll find that many of your questions will be answered. So we will put some of the resources onto the website. You can also go to the websites of these organizations. We'll provide links for that. There's a lot to explore. I'm so sorry that we don't have another hour to keep going through all of this, because I think we easily could. But I want to thank Maria and Ryan and Elvis for joining us today. I want to thank all of you for joining us and watching, listening. Thank you so much to our international sign interpreters and our captioner for their work. They've been wonderful to help us out and make this more accessible. The dialogues are available as videos and audio on the center's YouTube and podcast channels. You can find those linked, I think, in the chat, but they are also on the website. Further resources from the panelist organizations will be sent actually to all of you who attended today. You'll get it next week. And you can do so either, we'll send that to you. You can also get in touch with Ryan at any time. But thank you to the panelists for all the work that you're doing. And I'm encouraged by what I hear, and I hope everyone else is too. So we look forward to seeing you next time in our next digital dialogue. And thanks so much for being here.